Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, staff and those who may be watching online. Welcome to the last council meeting of our current council. The City of Swan disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Where an application for approval, a licence or the like is considered or determined during this meeting, the City warns that neither the applicant nor any other person or body should rely upon that decision or that discussion or determination until written notice of either an approval and the conditions which relate to it or the refusal of the application has been issued by the City. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the Council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in the meeting during public question time and public statement time, it is assumed that your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful to the Council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public will not be captured. Conditions of entry. No electronic, visual or audio recording or transmitting device or instrument is permitted to be used. A person who breaches this provision of the City of Swan Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019 will be required to immediately leave the premises. Attendance's apologies. Mr CEO, I have Councillor Parry on leave. Are there any others?
Mr Mayor, no others listed.
Thank you. Declarations of financial and proximity interest and interest affecting impartiality. Just be aware under Part 4.13 of the City's election caretaker provision states, for the purposes of transparency and the benefit of the public gallery, candidates are requested to identify themselves as an election candidate prior to asking a question or making a statement at a briefing session, agenda forum, a council meeting or a committee meeting. The following councillors are candidates in the upcoming local government election: Councillor Catalano in the Altone ward, Councillor Kiley in the Altone ward, myself in the Pearce ward, Councillor Jones in the Pearce ward and Councillor Zanino in the Swan Valley Gidgee Gannup ward. This is taken to apply for the entirety of the meeting, and the relevant councillors will not be required to identify their candidacy each time they address the meeting. Current declarations are as per the agenda forum, and Mr CEO, I believe there are more.
Yes, Mr Mayor, we have a few more declarations of interest. The first one from Councillor Congerton, it's in relation to item C14, which is Councillor Kiley's revocation motion for the proposed shop building Lot 3 Strata, Lot 1, number 53, The Crescent, Midland, DA 280 of 21. It's an interest of impartiality, and the reason is Dynamic Planning has acted for one of my companies in the past. We have a declaration of interest from Councillor Johnson. It's in relation to item 4.1, which is amendment number 182 to local planning scheme number 17 to exempt solar panels from requiring planning approval, and it's a direct financial, a proximity and an impartiality interest, lives in a house in Guildford facing north impacted by the need to submit a DA for solar panels. Councillor Richardson, in relation to the same item 4.1, amendment number 182 for local planning scheme number 17 to exempt solar panels from requiring planning approval. It's a direct financial proximity and impartiality, and the reason is lives in Guildford, current DA in for solar panels. Councillor Scanlon, in relation to item 4.1, which is again amendment number 182 to local planning scheme number 17 to exempt solar panels from requiring planning approval. It's an indirect financial and a proximity, and the reason is I own a property in Guildford. Councillor Kiley, in relation to item 4.1, the amendment number 182 to local planning scheme number 17 to exempt solar panels from requiring planning approval. The interest is a direct financial, and the reason is I reside in the heritage area as described under the Heritage Act 2018.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Any further declarations from either councillors or staff? None. Now move on to public question time. Questions and answers recorded in the minutes of the meeting may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Administration Regulations of 1996. Questions and answers marked with an asterisk have been amended either for the purpose of summarising, removing preambles and statements, etc., or editing. 5.1 is questions that were taken on notice. We have questions that have been supplied by Ms Naomi Jenkins and Mr Sam Ashton of Ass, and they have been answered. 5.2 is questions relating to items on the agenda. 5.2.1 are questions which due notice has been given a high of nil. Is there anyone in the gallery that wishes to ask a question relating to items on the agenda this evening? Okay, I have nil. Other questions? Questions to be taken on notice? Questions to the following people provided in writing with due notice have either been answered or taken on notice, and they are Ms Karen Mowat, Mrs Naomi Jenkins, Mr Nick Minnett, and they have either been answered or taken on notice. 5.3.2, questions without due notice. Questions from the following people have been provided in writing without due notice and have been taken on notice. They are Ms Lee Borden, the President of the Woodbridge Ratepayers Association Incorporated, and Mr John Considine, Convener of the Helena River Alliance and a resident of Woodbridge. And the following member of the public has registered to ask questions of a general nature, and that is Mr Gavin Troy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question this evening is, will the Council give consideration to requesting the State Planning Commission to review their decision of 2018, that is the MRS Amendment 1313/41, applying to the realignment of the National Rail Freight route through Bellevue and Midland? That MRS amendment was published in 2018 but followed much earlier considerations from 2015 and appeared to be influenced by the MRS overall plan boundaries for Midland at that time, that in turn focused heavily on the creation of the Midland Redevelopment Authority. That 2015 to 18 consideration of a realignment of the National Rail Freight route considered three options and decided upon an alignment that branches from an existing route approximately 200 metres west of the existing Roe Highway Bridge, near the corner of Edward Street, Race and Parade, disrupting properties on Ridgeway Road, Kep Court, Clayton Road, Wilden Street and Military Road, before passing over a new bridge over the Helena River and then arcing westward north of the Great Eastern Highway bypass before rejoining the existing route. This proposed realignment route will serve Midland poorly and present further difficulties to the road network, now subject to significant changes under the MRWA Great Eastern Highway bypass project. Some of you may be aware of that pamphlet. Those changes impact on Roe Highway, Abernethy Road, Lloyd Street and the new Helena River Bridge. One of the options rejected in that 2018 decision, the most easterly, had financial implications at the time, which today, near to the near to 2022, demand reconsideration of the more recent developments evident in that broader area. This railway alignment must be relocated further east than the present decision to serve this community, the town of Midland and the state more effectively and efficiently. The timing is opportune. I commend the matter to your incoming council.
Thank you, Mr Troy. Are there any other members of the gallery wishing to ask a question of a general nature? No, thank you. Now move on to public statement time. Registration for public statement is required by 3 p.m. Tuesday, October 12, and we have one person registered to make a public statement, and that is Miss Marilena Stimfel, I hope I get that correctly, on behalf of the Helena River Alliance in regard to the Lloyd Street Bridge. And Ms Stimfel, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Marilena Stimfel and I reside in South Guildford. Mayor, councillors and staff, today I speak on behalf of 7 local community groups to bring to your attention our concerns regarding the concept design of the proposed Lloyd Street Bridge, which is to cross the Helena River. We are concerned with the impacts of the concept design and that the concept design is outdated. The design does not perform environmentally or culturally, it may be unsafe and it is not best practice. It is in breach of state and federal government and your own policies and vision statements. It goes against all trends in public and community policy recommending retention of canopy and biodiversity. The design will introduce a choke point in the floodplain that may increase the risk of upstream flooding. We understand that the bridge was designed well over 10 years ago and that the present Council did not approve that design. However, all risks and responsibilities will be borne by those who will allow it to be built in its present form. We are presenting an alternative pillar-style design which is appropriate for the location and respectful of the site in keeping with today's standards and cultural heritage. And we gave you a handout prior to this meeting. Councillors, today you have the opportunity to enable everything, to improve and address this outdated concept design. We are simply asking that you give due considerations to other alternatives. We also request that you will instruct your CEO to advise us in writing of Council's decision and the reason for that decision. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms Stempfel. Takes to petitions. Petitions have already been conducted at the agenda forum. Deputations, sorry, I'll rephrase that. Petitions, at this point I'm not aware of any petitions. Does anyone in the gallery have a petition or any councillors? Be none. Deputations have been dealt with. Announcements by the presiding member, and I have one in councillors. Hope you bear, and ladies and gentlemen, bear with me. Councillors, tonight is indeed a remarkable time. It is remarkable because we have achieved so much together as a council despite our differences. We've worked well to keep the wheels of government turning during the most turbulent time in our generation's history. And we've been through a lot, and I want to reflect on some of those achievements that we've shared over the last 2 years. We faced the hurdle of COVID-19 just months after forming this council, and we worked together to protect and enhance our community during this time. We've encouraged social distancing, vaccinations, limited travel, and we moved quickly to respond to state and federal government requirements that seem to change on a daily, if not hourly basis. We've supported our local businesses through individual and organised campaigns such as the Go Local First and Takeaway Tuesdays. We injected an additional $8.85 million into our community through the COVID stimulation package, which allowed local contractors to maintain jobs whilst delivering valuable and necessary community infrastructure. There were over 56 projects, and I'd just like to touch on some of those, if you wouldn't mind. Footpath and drainage construction repairs and maintenance, basketball pavilion roof, chimney repairs to Guildford Heritage Buildings, lighting at Jungle Park, Livy's Playground and Swan Regional Riverside Park, storage sheds at Altone Park, Midland Men's Shed, Charlotte's Vineyard Pavilion, Valley Bowls artificial turf replacement, the repair works at Dulcie Lidlow netball courts, shade sails over playgrounds in Altone, full building refurbishment of the Gidgegannup CWA building, the Dayton Dog Park, a skate park and lighting at Sandown Park, 50 bus benches in the West Swan Hall renewal and multiple playground renewals. Our two-pronged approach to the COVID-19 recovery provided assistance to commerce and community, and I want to thank each and every councillor in this chamber for your support of those programs and for your flexibility in responding to what was a rapidly changing environment. On a very hot day in February, the first day of a 5-down lockdown, we experienced a Wirraloo Gidgegannup bushfire that tore through our community, razed 86 properties and killed countless animals. It was a miracle that no one was killed in this emergency, and I think that having so many people at home during this emergency contributed to a heightened awareness of the impending risk. As the fire raged over 5 days, our community once again showed its true colours. The mateship, compassion and generosity Aussies are known for was on full display. The blaze ripped through the green hills of Wirraloo and Gidgegannup, and Tilden Park saw the worst of it. The piles of rubble and sheet metal that were once homes stood juxtaposed by sheds untouched by flames. With no power, no water, no telephone and patchy two-way communications, residents and firefighters fought day and night until it rained on the 7th day. Over 200 houses were saved through the gallant efforts, but unfortunately many houses were lost, including homes belonging to a number of our volunteer firefighters who were selfless in protecting their town. Their work, the vigilance of our residents and the rapid response of authorities all helped save lives. No lives were lost during this event and only one hospitalisation for smoke inhalation. We are indebted to our volunteers, and I would like to recognise their contribution once again in this chamber because of they were absolute selfless heroes. I would also like to applaud our staff that during that period went way above the call of duty and performed with admirable respect for our community and compassion. And I congratulate all of them, and we should be very proud of our staff in that situation. And despite these significant life-threatening challenges, we have continued to deliver for our community. And I want you to recognise that this council has continued to make decisions, approve budgets, develop strategic plans and generally improve our community. Since this council was elected, we have spent over 169 hours, in fact, in this chamber delivering good governance to the people of the City of Swan. We have read 705 reports and made over 850 decisions, answered 411 questions from councillors and 1,223 from the public. Not that I'm counting. Councillors, thank you for your service. I know how comprehensive these reports are and how long it takes to read them and with an eye for detail, to undertake consultation and to visit to sites. I don't have stats on that, but I have no doubt that you've all invested significant time towards your duties and responsibilities serving on this council. We have had some wins. The decisions we make guide our staff and community to deliver great things, and it's worth recognising some of those recent achievements. Last week, we secured the long-term goal of supplying West Bullsbrook with scheme water to partially eliminate the effects of the PFAS contamination in the soil and groundwater. And a lot of work is being done in the background to achieve this, so thank you to the staff, both the CEO for working this, and a great outcome for that community. Northlink opened in the final stages of April 2020, providing a safe and efficient connection between Mouchet and Perth, and a great time saver for the residents of Ellenbrook and Bullsbrook, as well as significantly reduce traffic through the Swan Valley. We will see the Eastlink project progress following our advocacy seed funding. The state and federal government have committed $10 million towards design and consultation work. Stock Road in Bullsbrook is now under construction, and finally we'll be able to link the residents and businesses of Bullsbrook directly to the new Tonkin Highway. Ellenbrook is getting a new indoor pool and leisure centre following a $25 million federal government commitment and building on a $7 million commitment from the Barnett government reaffirmed by the McGowan government. Tenders for the construction closed at 2 p.m. today, and I'm pleased to announce that we received 3 applications for this project. Midland Oval has been transformed and the new junction program is well underway. This magnificent development is redefining Midland by providing a safe and accessible space for people to live, work and play. The $1 million investment by the Staffanelli family has made for a spectacular play space, which is now open and proving very popular for children of all ages. The Lloyd Street Bridge is underway as part of the Great Eastern Highway Bypass project being delivered by Main Roads. This $40 million state and federal government commitment will connect Midland and Hazelmere in a safer and more direct way. And finally, the refurbishment of our Swan Active leisure centres is well underway with a program to repair and upgrade these facilities to service the community for years to come. So thank you again for your support of our community and our efforts towards improving the lifestyle of our residents. You are all to be commended. Throughout all of this, we've been supported by over 1,000 staff and contractors who have helped to make our vision a reality. To the CEO and his team, we thank you. The hours you all put in, the emails to respond to, and the problems you help us to solve. You are all amazing, and your passion and dedication to our community is abundantly demonstrated through your commitment to positive community outcomes. We thank you. We will, however, have a number of councillors leaving us. Firstly, Councillor Scanlon. Thank you for your contribution to the City of Swan and to the people of Midland and Guildford. Your youthful energy has brought excitement to some of our local programs, and your work with young people and families in this area is commendable. Your passionate contribution to this chamber are thought-provoking and challenging. We wish you all the best for your return to nursing and the caring of your brother. Councillor McNamara. We also extend our thanks to Councillor John McNamara for his dedication for our community. His 24 years in this chamber, he has contributed to the development and improvement of Ballajura and Malaga. his drive to see an aged care facility in the Bellajura region, and his advocacy for the Bellajura Police Station are some of the milestones of his term. John, thank you for your service. Congratulations on your freemanship, and I look forward to seeing you in the Swan New Active Gym in Bellajura. A great achievement and legacy for you, John, and please join me everyone in thanking Councillor McNamara. And finally, thank you for everything that we've accomplished so far. Good luck to everything that you will achieve in the future. Be well, do good things and stay grounded. So now let's get on with the show. Members' questions. There are a number of questions for Councillor Johnson and they have been tabled and answered. Questions for which due notice has been given. Any councillors with any questions? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. My question is about the Lloyd Street Bridge. Through you, Mr Mayor, can I ask the CEO, what influence do we have over the design of the Lloyd Street Bridge?
Mr Coaten might be better for that, I think.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the project is being managed by Main Roads. It's a design and construct contract, and a range of options have been looked at, and the design is in an advanced stage. The public consultation on the project closed on Monday. Main Roads are collating some the feedback for that, and they'll be presenting it to us. But the project's being managed by Main Roads.
And is it possible for this council to request that Main Roads consider an alternative design along the lines of the, I guess, the Helena River Coalition?
Well, the council certainly could request that. The likelihood of it being, the design changed, I can't give you any assurance in that regard.
In that case, I know it comes later in the meeting. I will give notice of moving a motion along those lines to request a design change of Main Roads. Thank you.
Councillor Coley, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I had the opportunity to listen to you on radio this morning in regards to the cost of the election. I wondered if you'd like to share with the rest of the chamber the cost of the election to date, just for the interest of those listening at home and for other councillors.
Happy to do that. So, councillors, this morning I attended at ABC Studios in East Perth a focus on local government. In attendance were obviously a number of mayors, members of the community from various parts of Perth, the Minister for Local Government and ex-councillor for Nedlands, Mr Larry Graham, and another gentleman whose name escapes me. Part of the discussion there was a lot of good discussion over the hour. One of the issues raised was going to make elections for local government compulsory. I was unexpectedly singled out to comment by the presenter, Nadia Mitsopoulos, along that lines on my personal view. Part of what I spoke about there was the ongoing cost of postal elections. Postal elections were introduced some years ago with a view that it would drive greater participation, and we know from the low returns it could be deemed abject failure. The City of Swan election costs in excess of $400,000 every 2 years. Mark Irwin, who was also on the panel this morning, confirmed that their election is somewhere north of 700, and the Mayor of Joondalup told me this afternoon that theirs was in excess of 600. So 3 local governments there pushing nearly $2 million of ratepayers' money every 2 years to run a ballot by mail that we get mid to high 20s returns, to me was uneconomical. And I questioned the Minister why they hadn't considered and what their objection was to compulsory voting and to building an electronic platform to invite people to have the option to be electronic or to a ballot box. So across the industry, the 2-year cycle is a tremendous burden on local governments to run an election, and I think the Minister should have a serious look at options there to reduce those costs to our ratepayers. Any further questions? Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Johnson's question about the Lloyd Street Bridge, we've received a $40 million grant from the federal government for the construction of that bridge, Mr Coaten, through you, Mr Mayor, to change the design to something in the order as put forward by the various community groups. what financial implication would the City of Swan be liable for? Just an estimation. I know they've got to be looked at, but it's
I
important
have discussed
consideration.
that in general terms with Main Roads, the cost, and their advice was that the cost difference would be in the order of magnitude of tens of millions of dollars, and that the city would be expected to pay that money if it was a request that we were making.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors? No. Leave of absence, Mr CEO.
Mr Mayor, we have a leave of absence request from Councillor Henderson, and it's from the 25th of October to the 31st of October inclusive.
Thank you. Any further applications for leave? Can I have a move that that be accepted? Moved to Councillor Zanino, seconded Councillor Kiley. Is there anyone against? Declare that approved. Confirmation of the minutes. I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes of the previous meeting contained on page 12. Moved Councillor McCulloch, seconded Councillor Congleton. Anyone against? Declare that carried. We now move to items of business left over from the previous meeting. Item 13.12, the modification of condition number 6 of approval DA 55/2019 for a transport depot located at 1370 Great Northern Highway, Upper Swan. And we have a motion from Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council resolve to 1. Approve the application for a modification to condition number 6 of approved DA 55/2019 to read 6. Vehicular access to the site is restricted as follows. And 1. Exit only onto Great Northern Highway between the hours of 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. subject to the approval of a crossover design by Main Roads WA, and 2. All other access and egress to and from the site to be via Copley Road only. And main number 2 is advise the applicant, owner and submitter of council decision. And 3, record the reason for changing the officer's recommendation is that the change of arrangements will considerably reduce the disturbance by way of noise affecting nearby neighbours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McNamara. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Scanlon. Is there anyone against? Question, Councillor Congleton.
Thank you, Mr. My question is through you to Mr. Coaten, please. The motion by Councillor McNamara says that the exit on the Great Northern Highway between the hours of 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. subject to the approval of a crossover design. Is that subject to the approval and a crossover design?
Mr. Coaten.
I might refer that to Mr. Russell, who I believe prepared that alternative.
Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the applicant is only after limited movement and only out of the property between those hours. And so Main Roads may, not certain, but may be willing to accept that if they understand it's egress only and only within those hours. And then if they accept those terms, they might say this is subject to them accepting the design onto that, which they must do in all instances. Then that's a workable arrangement.
Okay, so I have someone against. Do you wish to debate it? Okay. In that case, Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I want to ask you to have a look at the heavily redacted statement that we had issued last week from the point of view of, it says thanks, and it's from the Upper Swan Residents and Ratepayers Association. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but this particular redacted document actually makes my case. It makes the case for the applicant as well. It says that the proposed crossover is directly opposite the southern crossover entry and exit at Puma Station, which means that there is an existing entry and exit already across the street. 1 metre away on the right hand side, just 1 metre away on the right hand side, there's an exit and an entrance crossover. The proposed crossover directly adjacent to Lot 21, which has just left in and left out condition. There is also Lot 21, which has a left in. That's the one I'm talking about, 1 metre away. And also, we believe that a left in and left out condition, any modification in condition 6, for instance, will encourage the transport depot to be left in and left out. The proponent is not looking for left in. This is totally different. It's a win-win situation from the point of view of a left out only. All of these others, first and foremost, this particular redacted document indicates that it is happening up there, and there are many exits and entrances onto this particular highway. This particular proponent is not looking for an entry. It's looking just a simple exit out of the property, so as to alleviate any disturbance that might be for the neighbours at early morning. That's all that they're asking for, Mr. Mayor. Nothing else, and that's basically it. And with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to digress a little bit away from this subject. That's all I'm going to say about this particular. You can vote. I want to thank Council for everything, and there's nothing got to do with this particular motion, for everything that they've helped me in the last 24 years. I really do want to thank the mayors. I want to thank the late Charlie Gregorini and Eric Lumsden for the direction that they gave me. I just want to say thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All the best.
Thank you, Councillor McNamara. Councillor Scanlon is the seconder.
Thank you. Nothing further to add. I just wanted to hear from
Okay.
Councillor McNamara.
Councillor Johnson, Councillor Henson, sorry, you're speaking against the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, the problem I have with this is that the North East Corridor is going to see very significant growth, and the highway is going to be one of the major arterials for traffic flowing north and south, and the hours will impact on early morning traffic, which will be growing, and it'll get heavier and heavier. The fact of the matter is that the block was granted a subdivision to have access to that smaller block to the north of the one on Copley Road via a battle axe, so that they could utilise a subdivision for that use. The point is, there was no access granted to Great Northern Highway for a reason, and that is that there's already quite a few access points on the road, and frankly, if we have any more, the risk to traffic is going to rise, and I think that the access point is still available to them on Copley, and that should be sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker 4. Question, Councillor Collier.
Through you, Mayor. The hours of operation currently approved, would I assume that would be from 7 a.m. onwards? Is that correct?
Mr. Russell.
I believe so. I believe that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
They're looking to extend the hours, the operating hours, from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. accessing Great Northern Highway. So, yeah, thank you.
Speaker against the motion. Councillor Collier.
Mayor, I'll be brief. I believe that trucks exiting on Great Northern Highway at 5 a.m, potentially in the dark, present a real risk to all traffic users in that area, and I won't be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Any further speakers for or against? Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. Just in relation to Councillor Collier's last comment, trucks will still be exiting onto Great Northern Highway, just not from this driveway. They'll be coming from the nearby street. So to try and find the balance between upsetting neighbours who might still be asleep at 5 o'clock in the morning, where the trucks would have to go down a long adjoining driveway, I'm supporting this application, but it's all subject to Main Roads approval. And if they've only got a 2-hour window to exit their property directly onto Great Northern Highway, whether they turn left and go south or turn right and head north, that's up to them. But after 7 a.m, when the main traffic is starting to get busy on that stretch of the road. They just can't exit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor McNamara, close the debate.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say that truck drivers, most of them are very responsible. They have actually learned to drive, even in the dark. So the case of them coming out in the dark is, it doesn't stand as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Mayor. Also, it doesn't stand from the point of view of if they could not drive out in the dark, then they shouldn't be driving a truck at all. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll leave it be.
Someone employs truck drivers. I agree with some of those statements. We now close the debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion is carried. Now go item 1313. Proposed single house at lot 409, number 41, Liberté Crescent, Baskerville, and motion from Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council resolve to defer consideration of this matter to the ordinary meeting of Council to be held 17th of November 2021. Reason for the deferral is that both the applicants and the complainant wish to meet to assess and agree to a compromise location for the development. This has not been possible due to the applicant being away.
Seconder, Councillor Zanino. Is there anyone against? Carried. We now move to Part B, and councillors, those items that have been withdrawn are 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.6, 4.7, 4.9, 4.10, 4.11, 4.12, 5.1 and 7.1.
Mayor, could I withdraw 4.8? It was already withdrawn, and so I'm going to speak to it now.
Okay, and you've got a motion prepared?
Yes, that's to not approve the variation.
No worries. Thank you, Councillor. I move a motion that those items not be withdrawn, including the 3 confidential items, be moved. Moved Councillor Kiley, seconded Councillor Jones. Is there anyone against? We'll declare those carried. We move straight to item 4.1, which is Amendment 182 to the Local Planning Scheme to exempt solar panels from requiring planning approval. And I'll ask Councillors Richardson, Scanlon, Johnson and Kiley to leave the room.
Just before they leave.
But just before you go, councillors, I'll just get Ms Albright just to explain the reasons for your leaving and the process we're going to go through in a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify that the councillors who are residents in Guildford have declared a financial interest in item 4.1, and that's because there's an amendment being proposed in item 4.1 applies a condition to the properties that are entered in the Register of Heritage Places under the Heritage Act 2018, which applies to all properties in Guildford, which is why these councillors have declared an interest. Councillors can seek to participate in this matter with the council's approval if the council consider the interest declared by the councillors to be either in common with a significant number of other ratepayers or residents, or if you consider that interest is trivial. So I do need the councillors that have declared financial interest to also declare the extent of their interest. I appreciate that may be quite difficult to do because the interest is associated with whether or not the value of your property may or may not be impacted by the proposed amendment. But you do need to explain your interest to the council so that the council can then vote on the matter.
Okay, so I'll go from left to right. Councillor Kiley. You just stand up there if you like, Councillor.
Mayor, councillors, my interest in this item is the fact that I own a property in Guildford, and it is within the heritage area as prescribed by the Heritage Act 2018. Simple as that.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I also live in a house in the heritage area of Guildford. My interest in this is a little bit more complex. My house faces north. I do not have solar panels. the current situation is I would have to apply for a development consent to put up solar panels, and if this went through, I would still have to apply for a development consent to put up solar panels. But the difference would be that I would be one of about, I estimate, 50 properties in the city of Swan that would be required to get a development consent for solar panels, and that is simply because the only place to put the panels is on the north. And if you read the agenda item, you will see that if a house needs to have solar panels put on it and they're visible from the street, then a DA, a development consent, is required. So that's why I've declared a financial proximity and an impartiality interest, because it's probably all three. So that's my reason.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to let all councillors know that I also own a property in a house in a heritage area in Guildford, and I have a current development application for solar panels, which is going through SAT, and it also could be a combination of financial, trivial or impartiality.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scanlon.
This is another slightly complex issue for me. I own a non-heritage home in Guildford, but as you know, the entire suburb is heritage listed, and there are currently solar panels on my house, which were mistakenly put by the installer in the wrong position, and we're currently seeking to have them moved so they are not facing the street.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Okay, I'll now ask the councillors to leave the room. Hang on a sec. So, councillors, there are a number of things we need to decide here. Firstly, we need to decide if the interest is so trivial or insignificant that it is unlikely to influence the disclosing member's conduct in relation to this matter, or is common to a significant number of electors or ratepayers. And those are the only two reasons. Council needs to determine the extent of the participation permitted, that being present in the chamber only, or present in the chamber to debate and vote. Councillors may then enter the chamber and participate to the extent permitted by council. So on that, councillors, I need a motion to resolve that which councillors are permitted and to what extent.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councillor
There
Compton.
was commentary in relation to property values and whether that was a financial impartiality. And you didn't mention that in your little preamble a minute ago.
I'm reading the script provided by our governance manager.
Mr Mayor, but it was specifically stated by 3 out of 4 about the financial component.
Ms Albright, do you want to comment?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So under the Act, the Council can allow councillors that have a financial interest to participate and vote in a matter if you consider that interest to be either trivial or in common with a significant number of other ratepayers or residents. That includes a financial interest.
Okay. Over mover, Councillor Lucas.
Yes, I move that the interest disclosed by Councillor Johnson, Kylie, Scanlon and Richardson is common to a significant number of electors or ratepayers, and 2, this council will permit Councillors Johnson, Kylie, Scanlon and Richardson to participate to the following extent: that they be present in the chamber and be allowed to debate and vote.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Congleton. Is there anyone against? Look at that. Carried. Someone please recall 4 councillors. Okay. I'll get you to read that back out to them when they come back in on the result, okay? Yep. Might have gone home. I don't think it was. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Lucas, you can just read out the motion that council just voted on and moved unanimously.
Yes, thank you. I move that all four councillors be permitted to, first of all, that the interest is common to a significant number of electors and ratepayers, and that the four councillors be allowed to participate to the following extent: to be present in the chamber, to debate and vote on the item. Thank you, and it's passed unanimously.
Councillor Lucas, and now Councillor Kylie, you have a motion to that effect.
Yeah, withdraw that alternative motion, Mayor. And just we'll move the officer recommendation.
I'll move the officer's recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so you're withdrawing it. You'll move the officer's recommendation. I have a seconder in Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone against? We declare the officer's recommendation carried. Now 4.2, which is an amendment to adoption of Amendment 194 to the local planning scheme number 7 is to modify specific use zone 74, Rosehill Waters Estate, multiple properties in South Guildford, and a motion from Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my motion is that Council resolve not to support Amendment number 194 to local planning scheme number 17 to modify special use zone number 24, Rosehill Waters Estate, multiple properties in South Guildford for the following reasons. 1, the area continues to be affected by aircraft noise. 2, the amendment may see significant large tree canopy loss. 3, traffic concerns at the intersection of Queens Road and Great Eastern Highway are unresolved.
Seconder. Councillor Johnson, is there anyone against? There's no one against it? Okay. Any wish to debate it? No. No? Okay. No one wish to debate. I'll put the vote. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Motion is carried. Now move to item 4.3, the responsible authority report for proposed Dayton neighbourhood centres at Lot 3 and 803, parts Lot 4 and 5, Repton Street in Dayton. I need a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation as presented. So move Councillor Lucas and a seconder. Okay, councillors, we just moved that. Then we have an amendment after. So seconded, Councillor Kylie is the seconder.
No.
Well, no,
No.
probably not, because you're going to move an amendment. So Councillor Jones. So I have a mover and a seconder, and I now have a proposed amendment to the officer's recommendation from Councillor Kylie.
Councillors, my amendment to the change to the overall motion is related to point 7, modify condition 7 of the responsible authority report recommendation to have it read as follows. 7. Prior to the occupation of the development, the applicant/owner is to enter into satisfactory arrangements with the City of Swan for the upgrade of Repton Street between Issoudun Street and Cranley Street by installing embayment parking, street lighting, footpaths to both sides and incorporating 1. Bollard treatments and a realignment of the proposed footpath adjoining the proposed crossover between showroom 4 and office 2 to achieve greater distance from the property boundary and clearance from exiting service vehicles, and 2. Provision of raised zebra crossings generally in the locations depicted in the applicant's submitted landscaping plan.
There's no objection from the mover.
Or the seconder? Okay, so is there anyone against the amendment? No, that now becomes part of the substantive motion. I've got a mover and a seconder. Is there anyone against this, the substantive motion as amended? If not, we'll declare that carried. Now move to item 4.4, Metronet Stage 1 Morley to Ellenbrook Line, Malaga train station at Lot 11, Beachborough Road at Whiteman, and Lot 810, Tonkin Highway, Cullacabadi, and a proposed motion from Councillor Congerton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council resolved to advise the West Australian Planning Commission that the application for planning approval of the Malaga station is considered to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the City of Swan Local Planning Scheme 17 and the orderly and proper planning of the City of Swan Local Planning Strategy. Recommend that Metronet project team in consultation with the City of Swan investigate the opportunity to improve connectivity between the train station site and the surrounding suburbs of Balladura, Malaga and Bennett Springs. 3. Recommend to Metronet resolve future vehicle access to Lot 1102 and Lot 1103 Beachborough Road North, Whiteman, to the south of the station site at this early stage of development to ensure coordinated vehicular movement network is in place from the outset in accordance with the bushfire evacuation requirements of SPP 3.7. 4. Recommend that Metronet and Western Power relocate the proposed Western Power traction electricity substation and switchyard to an alternative location to provide greater separation from existing and will be existing residential and community areas. 5. Recommend that Metronet extend the pedestrian connection between Lot 1103 to the south and provide a safe and accessible path of travel between the future station and the church on that site. Note the reason for changing the modifications. The fact that the impact on the proposed access to the station will have on lots 1102 and lots 1103 Beachborough Road North. Whiteman is not addressed in the current development application is creating uncertainty for the landowners, and if not addressed at this stage, the development may have future cost implications on the project. As a vulnerable land use, the church on lot 1103 is required to maintain a minimum of 2 access points in the event of a bushfire emergency in accordance with State Planning Policy 3.7. The current design does not provide suitable pedestrian/cyclist access between the church on lot 1103 and the Malaga station, as only currently active use in the vicinity of the future station. It is appropriate that safe and accessible pedestrian connectivity between the church and the station should be provided. The currently proposed location of the electricity infrastructure would have a significant detrimental impact on the amenity of the adjacent properties, and an alternative location further west would significantly reduce the impact on the amenity caused by the infrastructure.
I will second it. Councillor McNamara. Is there anyone against? There is. You wish to debate it? Okay. Councillor Congleton, if you could open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it is no doubt at all in my mind that this particular rail station is not going to proceed. Currently, there is already earthworks taking place on both of the sites, on the substation as well as on the railway station itself. There is an extreme amount of activity going on at the moment. And the only issues that do take place is the ingress and egress from Marshall Road to the Potter's House, and also the Potter's House egress and ingress off of Beachborough Road East. So these need to be addressed on behalf of Potter's House, otherwise at some stage they will be landlocked in their own building, or no access to their own building. So this motion then requests... Didn't fall down the stairs, did he?
Ghost wasn't happy.
It is important that access and egress from the site is done, and also the fact that the substation plan for next door, the consultation of that particular substation wasn't sent to them until after the submission period was closed. So they had no opportunity to actually enter into a submission period with the state government in relation to this. So hence the motion amendments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Congdon. Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor. That's better. Thank you very much. Yes, this motion just speaks for itself, Mr. Mayor. I think it's excellent, and it gives a sort of a wake-up call to the state government from the point of view of their design. They've left a few bits and pieces out. They left a part of the community stranded, and this rectifies that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McNamara. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. Public transport is a really good thing in the right location, but this is the wrong location. And it makes better planning sense, and it's more consistent with the city's local planning strategy for the train line to be built along Reid Highway, along that reserve that's already been purchased by the state government for that, will locate the train line in amongst existing residential populations of 20,000 plus people, serving Beachborough, Bennett Springs, Lockbridge, Caversham and Dayton. So why hasn't it happened? Why is this train station being parked up effectively in the middle of nowhere? So is it all about the fact that there's no ability for car parks to be located along the reserve along Reid Highway? That's a design issue, surely. It appears to me that public transport planning in WA is car and land development driven, contrary to what the state government has promised for decades and what public transport is supposed to deliver, i.e. get cars off the road, reduce urban sprawl and protect groundwater and environmental amenity. I don't think there are many people in the Swan community who would disagree that this needs to happen. But this won't happen. Instead, to justify the location of this train station and train line, there'll be more urban sprawl. In this proposal tonight, there's 67 hectares of bushland west of Whiteman Park, north of the proposed train station, that's currently zoned general rural, that's going to be cleared for mixed residential development. Then next, likely there'll be future development of land south of the proposed train line cutting through Whiteman Park. And then the next future development of land around the rail line and station on the eastern boundary of Whiteman Park. There's a pattern emerging, and the logical conclusion is the loss of Whiteman Park. Priceless natural asset bequeathed to the state. It's not for sale. We've heard that decision makers are held to be complicit if they approve bad planning decisions. This is a bad planning decision because it's not consistent with the city's local planning strategy, which aims to protect the environment and decrease car dependency, reduce the city's carbon footprint and promote healthy communities with access to alternative modes of transport. Because to justify the train line and the train station going into the proposed location in this item, more urban sprawl is proposed. And that effectively counters what the state and local planning policies of the last decade have promised, with further loss of bushland, with all of its now rare and priceless environmental values for people forever, never to be replaced, with damage to the aquifer and groundwater, because this is the Nangara Mound from which surface water is supposed to discharge into the aquifer below and from which Perth derives much of its water supply, with, finally, the very real potential loss of Whiteman Park. In the officer's report, they say that there is a missed opportunity for greater benefit existing nearby residential neighbours and commercial businesses in this proposal. The proposed train station and line will not directly serve the 20,000 plus existing residents, as was originally planned, who will now have to drive to the train station because a walk or a ride will be difficult and time-consuming. That's extra cars getting to the station, which means congestion throughout Bennett Springs and Beachborough, with increased pressure, particularly on Eltone Road, Marshall Road and Beachborough Road. This is a recipe for disaster, and I won't be complicit in bad planning decisions. I want first world planning with first world solutions. And so I'm going to refuse to endorse this application, and I urge you to consider my motion to advise the WAPC that the planning application is inconsistent with orderly planning. And it doesn't matter whether they've started clearing or not.
Thank you,
we have to make this stand.
That's your 5 minutes. Speaker for the motion.
I have a question.
Question, Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor, to the appropriate officer. In Councillor Catalano's debate, I thought I heard words like Whiteman Park will disappear. The land on which the train alignment is on, the rail alignment, is that actually part of Whiteman Park and ceded to the state government, or is that land that was later purchased by the state government? If Mr van der Linde or Mr Russell could inform me, please.
Thank you, Mr van der Linde.
Mr Mayor, through you. My understanding is that that land was later acquired by the Commission and now forms part of Whiteman Park, and that land is zoned for recreational purposes under the MRS.
Thank you.
Speaker for the motion. Speaker for the motion, Councillor Colley.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I congratulate, first of all, Councillor Catalano for raising some really important issues that should have been raised in this chamber going back maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Certainly not on my time have I heard any discussion around where the alignment of the train station, the train line should be, or where we should have the actual station. Every point that Councillor Catalano has raised is very pertinent to this whole debate, but unfortunately this train has left the station. It is a fait accompli that this will go ahead, and it's with somewhat a little bit of reluctance that I would maybe some years ago like to have agreed with Councillor Catalano. I find myself in a situation now where I'm going to have to agree with Councillor Congdon and say where he prefaced his debate with the fact that it was a fait accompli as well. And I note that he has put in his alternative motion a number of management orders or requests that we actually make some improvements to it. So I think Councillor Congdon's motion overall is balanced, given the fact that we are not going to be able to stop this train station or the alignment. But I certainly would have liked this whole debate to come before Council some years ago, and that this Council actually had some input into it, particularly the ward councillors from the Whiteman ward and the Altone ward, who could have actually contributed some very thoughtful contributions, given some very thoughtful contributions to this. So I will be supporting Councillor Congdon's amendment, and congratulate him also for making some suggestions in that motion which would result in better outcomes for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Henderson, you indicated some time ago, so I noted you, Councillor Scanlon.
Councillors, the debate has been had, by the way, over many years about this. 2007, the then Labor government attempted to take this land for a train line. At that time, it wasn't said to be a train line, but it was for urban development. Priority 1 water, as mentioned at the time, was knocked out in the upper house by the Greens and the Liberal Party, if you want to talk politics. The fact of the matter is, it's been downgraded to priority 3, which means you can urbanise it. The fact of the matter is that the current Minister for Planning has had a lifelong dream to swipe hundreds of hectares of land from Whiteman Park, but not all of it. Just the part to the south of the bushland, all of the part that's now effectively cleared. I congratulate Councillor Congdon on his position, particularly around number 4. Well said, has to be said. But the point I want to make is that the argument has been put that this rail line should be going along Reid Highway, and feeble excuses were made so that that land could be taken for housing to pay for the massive losses that currently seeing in the Metronet program. And that stinks. That absolutely stinks. That land is supposed to be for future generations, for sport and the like. WAPC actually own the land that was bought from Whiteman many years ago, and many other landowners. One of the things I particularly dislike about this, if you look on page 151, the top picture, there's a roundabout on Beachborough Road North. Just happens to be at the train station and parking area, but there's a fourth exit that heads east, and it just happens to go across the top end of the Catholic Church land, not through it, which means that in the future we're going to see a massive flow of traffic through into what I see is going to be a huge urban development in there. And indeed, the policy currently is to put very high density development around train stations. So I can see this land being taken for massive development opportunity, massive profit out of what is effectively the people's land, we call it the Kings Park of our area. and our ratepayers, I think, are going to be massively disadvantaged, considering that we wanted to have sporting fields and alike for 100 years in the future of available land for our community. So I'm absolutely opposed to this. The horse is bolted, totally bolted. I don't even know why this is before us. Frankly, I think it's an abusive process that is before us, because we have no say. We'll have almost no say. As I said, I appreciate the fact that Councillor Congredon is attempting to raise some issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that although this may be a fait accompli, it doesn't mean that we can't tell the West Australian Planning Commission that this is not consistent with our local planning scheme number 17 and is not consistent with the principle of proper and orderly planning for the City of Swan. We are here to stand up for our ratepayers. We are not here just to tick boxes for any other level of government. And I believe it is in our ratepayers' best interest to reject this initial motion of Councillor Congredon that states that this is considered to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the City of Swan local planning scheme and the orderly and properly planning, because I don't believe it is. And I'd like to urge all councillors just to turn over the page and have a look at the proposed motion by Councillor Catalano, and that is that we write and advise that is inconsistent and we do not support it. Will this have an effect? Maybe, maybe not, but we will have had our say for our ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Any further speakers for or against the motion? Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. I just have to comment on a few items brought up in debate. First of all, I think we will be doing our community a big disservice by trying to either stop or change the current location of the train alignment. It has come to council on numerous occasions, going back 5, 6, 7 years. The original alignment along Reid Highway, and it was along Reid Highway, was found not to be the best option because it put it between the dualling of the Reid Highway and the back of the houses that exist in Bennett Springs. We'll try and avoid those sort of conflicts. So about 1 kilometre north of Reid Highway will be the current train alignment, and I thank Councillor Congredon for bringing up a number of items. But this train line, in my view, is perhaps 20 years late in the making. We want to assist public transport by, and remember, it's going to go from Bayswater to Ellenbrook. How many years have you heard the community of Ellenbrook saying we need access to better public transport? The dual bus lane, the bus freeway that was going to be constructed, is now a dual carriageway for vehicles. So I see this as a bigger improvement. The land on which it's going is not Whiteman Park proper in my view. It never has been. It was purchased by the WA government years ago. It's used currently. It's pretty well denuded. It floods every wet winter, and I have complaints from a gentleman in Bennett Springs when the water floods across Marshall Road, which I might add will be dualled as part of this project. So we'll be getting a better traffic outcome. And I think what everyone's failing to see is that the city's population is going to double in the next 30 years through that urban growth corridor, and they need access to that train line. I live in Beachborough. I think I'm the only councillor in this room that does live in Beachborough. Even if it was on Reid Highway, I would still have to drive my vehicle to the train station. So by shifting it 1 kilometre north, it's only going to take me an extra minute if I'm driving at 60 kilometres an hour. There's already provisions for crossovers on the intersection of Reid Highway and Eltone Road, a flyover, to better assist the traffic flow, the vehicular traffic flow, and that'll be continued down to Drumpilia for those people wanting to access the highway or to get over that intersection. So I commend Councillor Congredon for his fine reviewing. I hopefully that the WAPC takes those items into consideration. But I think it would be foolhardy at this stage to say, stop, we don't want the train line, or put it back to the old alignment on Reed Highway. They'll just dismiss it, and they're going to build it anyhow. So let's try and get some sensible amendments in for them to consider. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers? Councillor Johnson, speaking.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, just speaking against the motion. Just very briefly, I've said this before, it's never too late in a democracy to put your hand up and say we don't agree with something. The idea we already made this decision years ago, or somebody else made this decision years ago, doesn't mean that we cannot say that we don't like it. And that's why I'm opposed to this motion, because I want to support Councillor Catalano's motion. Thank you.
If I've got no other speakers, Councillor Congleton, your right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The station in the desert. Who would have thought that there would be a station so far away from Ballagera Central and so far away from Malaga Central, and the millions and millions of dollars that are going to be spent? So I guess the state government has taken the we build it and you will come attitude with their 67 hectare mixed use residential community development. And listening to some of the commentary around the room, Mr Mayor, and the discussions about it, that the planning scheme is not proper, it doesn't fit in with our planning schemes. There's other commentary that sits here about, notwithstanding the general support of the proposal, the train station is not conducive supporting active transport. It is going to happen, and my motion was to make sure that this, which is going to happen, and we can go no to this, and we can tell the state government, the WAPC, and the Minister for Planning that, no, we don't want it, and she's going to turn around and go, yeah, well, bad luck, you're having it, and if we're going to have it, let's have it on the terms that we've got in the request to make it better, rather than just have a flat-out, no, we're disinterested, we don't want to know about it. Because for those who drive by that site, as I do nearly every single day, it is on the march constantly. The trucks are in there, the water trucks are in there, the survey peggings are in place, it's on the go. So the most important thing, if this is to be the case, is to ensure we've got some of the conditions in play that they actually will listen to, and hopefully listen to and act on, to make sure it's not a disaster in the interim. Because ultimately, and I don't know when they intend to build on the 67 hectares in their Todd developments and other use, that might be 10 years away, 15 years away, we don't know. And if those who had been at the commentary for the briefing would have clearly understood that they don't have a position yet of when urbanisation is going to take place on this site. So we need to make sure that those people who are there currently have got access to ingress and egress to comply with their needs and requirements, and also the other pedestrian access as well. I'll leave it at that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Congdon. Now, for the motion, those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I declare that carried. Now I move to item 4.6, additions to existing exhibition centre at lot 616, number 76, Dulwich Street, Bennett Springs. I need a mover and a second to the officer's recommendation as presented. I've moved Councillor Congdon, seconded Councillor Lucas, and I have a proposed amendment from Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, my motion is to modify Condition 1 to have it read as follows. 1. During the annual bushfire season, as determined by the City of Swan, the hours of operation for the exhibition centre, in brackets Sacred India Gallery, are restricted from 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. When operating the exhibition centre outside of the designated bushfire season, hours of operation are restricted from 8:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. And also to modify Condition 4 to have it read as follows. 4. A maximum of 125 visitors are permitted on the site at any one time.
I have a second to the amendment, seconded by Councillor Scanlon. Anyone against the amendment? No, that now becomes part of the substantive motion. I've got a mover and a seconder for the amended substantive motion. Is anyone against?
Did you actually say that I seconded it or Councillor Scanlon?
You.
I'm afraid it was Councillor Catalano. You said Scanlon.
Who have we got up there?
Yeah, I had Scanlon too.
Yes, Catalano.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, we'll amend that was actually
Just to get
Councillor.
minutes right, that's all.
That's it, no problem. Okay, there's no one against the amended substantive motion. I declare that carried. Now move to item 4.7, which is proposed single house outside the building envelope at number 138 Litchfield Promenade, Janebrook. A motion from Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So my motion is that Council resolve to refuse the application for a single house located outside of the approved building envelope at lot 2160, number 139 Litchfield Promenade, Janebrook, for the following reasons. 1. The shift in the site of the building envelope will result in a reduction in amenity to the adjoining property owner at number 135 Litchfield Promenade, detracting from the semi-rural nature and bring the dwelling to close proximity of their own, a significant departure from the approved Janebrook local structure plan. And 2, the addition of a long gravel driveway will result in increased noise and dust from vehicles travelling close to the neighbour's boundary.
I have a seconder. Seconded in Councillor Johnson. Is anyone against? Declare it carried.
Oh, there's one against.
Oh, you are against it? Okay, and you wish to debate it? No? Okay. Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Everybody except Councillor McNamara. Okay, back to 4.8. The existing shed at lot number 797, number 24, Yanesi Crescent, Beachborough, and a proposed motion from Councillor Kiley.
It would now... I've withdrawn mine. Councillor Catalano is putting one instead.
So Councillor Catalano has got a motion, and your motion is, Councillor Catalano?
That Council resolved to not approve the variations to the deemed to comply requirements of the Residential Design Code. So it's just not approved, that's all. The rest of it can stay the same, I think.
And the reason,
the reason is that the shed has a negative impact on the amenity of neighbours.
Seconder? You're a seconder. Is anyone against? Councillor Lucas, and you wish to debate it? Okay. Councillor Catalano, you can open the debate.
Yes, thank you. If you look at page 259, you'll see that the shed in question, which actually doesn't comply with the residential design codes, but which I accept has been there for some time. But that shed now is very close to 2 neighbouring residences. And the thing about these residential design codes, they're not actually put in place for no reason. They're put in place to protect the amenity, in part, of neighbours. And in this case, that shed, in its current state, because it's about 5 square metres over what it should be in size, is actually encouraging activities in it that is actually impacting on the amenity of these other 2 objecting property owners. So, that's because it's too close to the boundary, it's too large, and that's why it doesn't comply. And as a result of that, it being too large, being too close to the boundary and too close to neighbours, we've got this situation now where activities are occurring in the shed that is causing a nuisance to the neighbours and impacting on their amenity and quiet enjoyment of their property. So if we approve an oversized shed like this, we've got a number of neighbours that are going to be impacted. We've also got a precedent that's set for the rest of the neighbourhood. I think that there is enough of an objection to the current activities that are occurring because of the kind of shed and because it doesn't comply, because of the size of the shed and because it doesn't comply. And I think that in this case we can't approve it because of the impact it's having on the neighbours. Thank you.
Councillor Kiley is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, you'll note on page 25 of the running sheet, I did have a motion to approve the shed with a number of conditions, and those conditions relate to issues that relate to the objections or the concerns that neighbours have around the use of the shed. And I'll just go over some of those just briefly because these are the sort of issues that are facing the neighbours. I was looking to ensure that the shed couldn't be used for human habitation, and I'm told by staff that that can't be a condition we could impose on the applicant on this type of application. I also put in the hours of the use of shed would be limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, and that also is of concern to neighbours who find that there are parties going on in the area, in that particular shed going on late into the evening and early morning. The light shouldn't be left on in the shed. We hear from the neighbours that the light actually broadcasts, disperses light into the neighbours' yard and into the bedrooms and the nearby properties. Another point I wanted to bring in was the shed is not to be used to entertain guests or play loud music effectively. But I'm told by staff these are conditions that can't be sustained in this motion or can't be put forward. So I will support Councillor Catalano's motion to not approve the shed. And as we all know, a good fence makes a good neighbour, and the same can be said for a good shed. This is not a good shed in respect of its size, its location near the neighbouring properties. So we have two adjoining neighbours that are affected by the use of the shed, and I must say that you could say that they're not related to the design of the shed. Well, I agree with Councillor Catalano. The size of the shed has invited use of the shed, which is causing significant problems to the adjoining property owners. So I ask you also to refuse this shed, so that these. Maybe we can have a reduction in size ultimately. Maybe the applicant can come back for a reduced size or a relocation of the shed. But at the moment, it's just causing too much difficulty in the area and has been ongoing for a number of years. So I ask you to also support refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion. Question, Councillor McNamara.
Questions for staff regarding this shed was built 18 years ago. And do we know when these objecting neighbours moved into the actual area? How many years ago?
Mr. Russell.
Through Mr. Mayor, I believe that might have been discussed in the General Forum last week. If I recall, the Deputy Mayor asked a pertinent question as to the I've got it here as lot 3, number 768, to the Battle Axe dwelling to the rear, which is on the north side of the property. I believe that question was asked of the applicant. The applicant indicated that it was something that has been built in the last couple of years, I think, not last year. And if this shed's been there for 20 years, then it certainly well predates the house. I don't know if the question was asked for with respect to the house that sits to its east. But again, certainly in the instance of one of the objecting neighbours, the existence of the shed predates that objector's occupation of the dwelling. I can't answer for the objector at number 22, lot 798.
Further question. Mr. Russell, is this not similar to a company or a person building in an exclusive area like a golf course and wants to be on the 16th or 18th green, and then all of a sudden complains that the ball is going into his garden?
Through Mr Mayor, if I take the inference from Councillor McNamara, I think you're saying is you can't complain about something that was there already that you willingly entered into an arrangement to be next to. If that is the inference, then yes, I would agree with it.
Okay. Go back to Speaker against the motion. Councillor Lucas, you're against. Wish to speak?
Yes, I think we have to get back to basics, councillors. This is an application to seek the deemed to comply requirements of the R codes. Why? Because the shed is 65.72 square metres, so it's 5 square metres above what it could be. Reducing it by 5 square metres will not curtail the activities that may exist in that shed. The shed has been there for 18 years and predates, and I really would like to draw your attention to page 259, if you could all turn to that page. One of the objectors comes from number 3A King Road, which is a new dwelling built in the last couple of years behind the residence of 3 King Street, which places that house, because it's a house behind a house on a normal 800 square metre lot, puts it very close to the rear yard and the fence line. Because of the shape of the subject lot on which the shed is located, on one point it is 0.53, just over half a metre off the fence, and in some cases it's 9.2 metres from the fence, being 8 centimetres. 4 inches too short from being compliant. The height, we'll just go back, the height of the wall is 40 millimetres too high, but the ridge height is compliant, being 600 mils lower than what the ridge height could be. When you look at all the overall conditions, the shed being there for 18 years and this refusal to allow those deemed to comply means the entire shed for structural integrity would have to be dismantled and moved. And I think that's too much an impost on the owner. The shed was there when he bought the property 18 years ago. He didn't know that it hadn't been approved by council. That's something that the real estate people should have picked up in their planning applications and coming to the city. So I don't think the owner of the lot should be penalised in any way and made to remove the shed for structural reasons, shift it 50 centimetres in some regard and this much in others. The other thing, very important on that page 259, yes, there were 2 objectors, but you'll notice the other 3 adjoining neighbours, the one to the left and the 2 immediately behind his block, are no objections. So they've lived in that neighbourhood and they've got no objections. Obviously the person who's built the second house behind their original house has got an objection, and we can't, and that's what I've suggested to Councillor Kiley earlier when he was trying to limit the use of the shed by saying no one can live in it. Well, no one can live in a shed anyhow, so that's a redundant thing. It's like saying you can't use the shed and you have to turn the light off by 10 p.m. It's like your house. Can we make people turn their lights off at 10 p.m? No. So that was I'm glad Councillor Kiley withdrew his motion. And in regards to the decibel rating, well, that's covered under the Noise Abatement Act. And if someone's having a noisy party, in the first instance they ring the police, they'll make an assessment, and need be, they'll get the environmental health officers to do decibel readings. And I note that the original motion had decibel readings far above what is allowed under the Noise Abatement Act. So I think common sense must prevail here. The shed's been there for a long time. I'm happy to speak to the owner about other issues. He rents it out, so he doesn't even live there. But I think it's too big an impost, and this is something that the deemed to comply conditions can easily be covered, and I can't support the motion to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Speaker for the motion. Are the speakers against the motion? No other speakers. Councillor Catalano, your right of reply.
Thank you. I'll just sum up with a few statements. I don't think it matters how long the neighbours have been next door. What matters is how long the shed has been used for its current activities. So that's what's the real problem. And the thing is that...
A point of order, Mr Mayor.
What's your point of order?
Well, we're talking about the use of the shed, which has nothing got to do with this application, which is about deemed to comply provisions. The deemed to comply provisions have got nothing to do with the use of the shed. That's a separate matter altogether.
And you are correct,
well,
Councillor Lucas. So
well, I would argue
if you
that...
get back to the deemed
I would
comply.
argue that the deemed to comply provisions, and what we're talking about here are the setbacks, and we're talking about the size of the shed, that they do have an impact on how the shed is used, and that is why we have these provisions to protect neighbours from use of these structures, and if they are being used in a way that impacts on their amenity. So I would disagree with that. But anyway, I don't necessarily agree that just by reducing the size, that it wouldn't have any impact on the current activities. Maybe it would. Maybe it would. And also, it's all very well that it's got a large setback on one section of the shed, but actually the section of the shed that's closest to the next door neighbour, that house that's been there the longest, is actually the minimum tiny little bit of setback. So, you know, it's all very well, we've got a big setback over here, but actually where it's really important, there is no setback hardly. So, you know, maybe it is actually more appropriate to actually just get this shed dismantled and moved. It's not the kind of structure that can't be dismantled and moved. And it's all very well, these other people on the other side of this property with this shed haven't objected because, of course, the shed isn't impacting on them because it's on the other side of the property. No doubt if the shed was on their boundary in the same manner, they would be objecting. So that what I'm trying to say is, and what I've been saying is, deemed to comply provisions, the code, the residential design codes are there for a reason, and that is to protect and keep neighbourhoods harmonious. And in this case, that is not happening. So I would suggest that in this case,
thank you, Councillor Catalano. That's your 3 minutes.
Vote against approving it.
The motion. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3. The rest are against. Is that carried? I need a motion to move the officer's recommendation.
So
moved by Councillor Lucas, seconded by Councillor McCulloch. Anyone against? Councillors Johnson, Catalano and Kiley. You wish to debate it all over again?
No, thanks.
No. Now put the vote. Those in favour? Everybody with the exception of Councillor Kiley, Councillor Catalano and Councillor Johnson. The officer's recommendation is carried. Now move to 4.9, a proposed patio at number 16 Tallage Loop, Brabham, and motion for Councillor Kiley.
Having some problems there.
Councillor Catalano, still got hers on.
Oh, sorry.
Councillors, I'll read it from the screen. My motion is that Council resolve to 1, grant approval to vary the deemed to comply requirements of the Residential Design Codes of Western Australia, R codes, with respect to a proposed patio at lot 436, number 16, Tallage Loop, Brabham. 2, note the reasons being 1, the application to cover the patio area is consistent with the lot coverage of surrounding houses, and 2, the shade provided by a covered patio will result in a greater use of the existing outdoor area, and 3, advise the applicant and those who lodge the submission of the Council's decision accordingly.
Seconder? Councillor Jones, I think you were the seconder. Is anyone against? Okay, carried. Now move to 4.10, proposed patio at number 26 Roger Street, Midland, and Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you. Very similar to the last motion we heard, that Council resolved to grant approval to vary the deemed to comply requirements of the residential design codes of Western Australia, being the R codes, with respect to a proposed patio at I've doubled up with patio there, Lot 1, number 26 Roger Street, Midland. Note the reason being that the increased patio coverage of the applicant's outdoor living area will facilitate a more functional and usable outdoor living area.
Seconder. Councillor Johnson. Is there anyone against? Carried. Now move to 411, proposed patio at number 153 Burnborough Avenue, Caversham. Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. I move to set aside the officer's recommendation and move the following. 1. Grant approval to vary the deemed to comply requirements of the Residential Design Codes Western Australia R codes in respect to the proposed patio at lot 4246 Burnborough Avenue, Caversham. And 2. Note the reasons for being that the increased patio coverage of the applicant's outdoor living area will facilitate a more functional and usable outdoor living area, having regard to their expressed need for greater shade in the summer and a usable outdoor space in winter.
Seconder, Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone against? Carried. Now we go to 412, proposed patio at number 30 Wishart Circuit, Averley, and Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Setting aside the officer's recommendation and resolving that the council resolve to 1, grant approval to vary the deemed to comply requirements of the Residential Design Codes of Western Australia R codes with respect to a proposed patio at lot 2082 number 30 Wishart Circuit, Averley. 2, note the reason being that the increased patio coverage of the applicant's outdoor living area will facilitate a more functional, usable outdoor living area that will still allow winter's sunlight and adequate ventilation to the covered area through the proposed pitched roof structure of which the opening is facing north.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder, Councillor Jones, I think your hand was up first. Is there anyone against? Carried. We now move to 5.1, construction of a footpath in May Street, Bellevue, and Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to not construct a footpath along May Street from Albert Street to the end of the cul-de-sac in Bellevue, proceed with the construction of an open drain crossing at the south end of May Street, Bellevue, and add $40,000 to the draft 2022-2023 capital budget for this project. 3, record the reason for changing the officer's recommendation is that 1, May Street is a short, low traffic cul-de-sac with only 4 houses, which is safe for pedestrians to walk along. A path is not needed and will cost $30,000. 2, an open drain crossing is needed to allow families with young children to safely and easily cross the drain.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Scanlon. Is there anyone against? Carried. Now move to 7.1, which is proposed ordinary council meeting dates of 2020, and motion from Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't propose to read out all those dates, if that's all right.
Oh, it could be cruel seeing it's the last night and make you do it.
Oh, just make the meeting go
on. No, I won't do that.
All right, thank you.
It's option 2 in the report, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's option 2 in the report. So my motion is that Council resolve to adopt the following schedule of dates for ordinary meetings of Council for 2022 and publish on the City's website as required by the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996. And those dates, councils are all 4 weeks apart, as we currently experience. 2, commence all agenda forums and ordinary council meetings at 6 p.m. 3, conduct all meetings in the council chambers, Midland Town Hall. And I forgot to add a reason, but the reason is to continue the existing 4-week cycle, which has worked so successfully. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Congleton. Is anyone against? There is. Councillor Lucas and Councillor Coley wish to debate it?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Johnson, take her away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, there are 2 options in the officer's recommendation. A new calendar of meeting just once a month, which is the officer's recommendation. This is the first option. This will reduce the number of meetings a year, at least planned meetings, by 2, from 13 to 11, and yet it will increase the size of the agenda at each meeting. So if you divide 13 by 11 councillors, you get 1.18, so it means that the size of the agenda will be 18% higher. In the last year, I understand that we have had two Part 2 council meetings, that is, we've had to adjourn and resume on 2 occasions. I put it to you, councillors, that if we do reduce the number of planned meetings, we will end up with more unplanned meetings, which I don't think is in anybody's interest at all. So, councillors, I think it is better to have a planned cycle of meetings every 4 weeks rather than to meet every month and end up with 4 or 5 Part 2 unplanned meetings as a result of adjournments. Councillors, the first time we had notification of this change was when the agenda was published. Yet last time we made a change to the meeting cycle, it was to move from meeting every 3 weeks to every 4 weeks and to include an agenda forum. We made this decision after a briefing and due consideration of the change. My view is we are a growing local government area and Council has an increasing number of decisions to make. We don't need to reduce the number of meetings of Council unless there is evidence that the CEO can't fill the agenda. The second option in the report is to continue with the 4 weekly cycle, which has proved successful, and I don't see any need to change it. The second option, provided by the officers of meeting every 4 weeks, is what I'm proposing in this motion, and I think the main reason for it, councillors, is if we don't go for this approach, we'll end up with more meetings, not less. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Congdon as the seconder.
Not much more to add, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we've, last couple of years, we've been working on the existing meeting format. I can't see reducing the number is going to make a lot of difference to where we are. We're still going to have the thick, long, large agendas to go through, I think, regardless. So, in my opinion, we just get on with it and do what we've been doing.
Councillor Lucas, Speaker against the motion.
Thank you. I'll be for sharing a deferment of this item of the next ordinary council meeting on the 17th of November to allow for the newly elected members of council to receive a briefing, as Councillor Johnson stated in his debate. Councillors receive a briefing from staff about meeting procedures and the number of meetings. On this item, this will allow them the opportunity to gain a better understanding of both options, to ask questions to satisfy themselves as to which option they prefer. Council meeting dates for the next council, I believe, should be determined by the next council, which will be formulated next Monday night after the election on Saturday. So I don't think that this council should be proposing the dates for the following council to adopt, and at a briefing session between now and the ordinary council meeting on the 17th of November, it will come back to council for a briefing. All councillors, new and old, can ask the relevant question as to why the officers recommended option 1 and option B, so they can satisfy themselves going forward as to which option we should adopt. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. For the Speaker against the motion, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, or Councillor Lucas, I would support that deferment and believe that's a good approach to deciding on this ultimate decision. But the reason, councillors, I would prefer the officer recommendation is that the officer's recommendation means that we won't meet until January 25. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I've had a break through COVID, when COVID came in, through to now. So 2 years of turning up and not having the opportunity to go on holidays or have a break from a meeting or an agenda forum, I personally would like that early part of January off. And it's a decision that we need to consider for ourselves and our families, but we also need to consider staff in this decision too. There's staff here that also need a break, that have been working hard throughout the COVID period, and a very difficult time for everybody throughout the world, I could say. But so I'm suggesting we go with the officer's recommendation. That means we won't meet until January 25, whereas Councillor Johnson's motion means we're back into it in January 12. Now that means that staff will have to be here basically straight after New Year's or over that period working to get the agenda together. I suggest we give staff a break as well as ourselves, because I think we deserve it. I'll argue the same point. I'll also support the deferment until the next meeting. But bear that in mind. It's not just about us, it's about our families and also about staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kiley. Speaker for the motion, Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. Look, I don't think deferring this is going to actually change things one bit. I mean, we've got a decision as to whether it's going to be the current 13 meetings or whether it's going to be reduced. And the fact is, if it's going to be reduced, if we're going to have reduced meetings, we're going to have more work to do each meeting, which is going to spill over. We've seen that before. So, like, nothing can take away the reality that's before us, which is there's a hell of a lot of work to do. And we might as well just accept that we've got to get down and do it. And it's better to do it in a paced and moderately paced manner rather than trying to scramble and rush through things or squeeze things together in a shorter schedule. And I take the idea about breaks. We'd all like breaks, and I mean we can always put our name down for a holiday break, but the council is not closing down over that January period. Everyone's still going back to work, and the business still comes in over those periods. So it's not going to change the slightest thing for us to take a break, because we're going to come back and we're going to find there's going to be a lot of work waiting for us. So, I mean, I think we're better just sticking with a moderate paced agenda or schedule of agendas and work to do, and just get on with it. And it'll be the same for the new council as it is for this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. Any further speakers for or against? No other speakers. Councillor Johnson, I'll ask you to close.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think this council is well equipped to make this decision. I'm sure the new councillors are also going to be very capable of making the decision. But at the end of the day, this council does have more experience of understanding the 4-week cycle and the amount of work that we have to do. So I think that's the argument for making the decision now. Councillors, if you want to take January off, just put in a leave request. And likewise, the staff have holiday too. And speaking about my full-time job, I don't get the whole of January off. I get 4 weeks leave a year, and that'll be end of December, early January. That'll be 2 weeks, and the other 2 weeks will be taken at some other time. So I don't think we need to have a long holiday. We've got a system that works. It's extremely effective. We need to get through the work, particularly the planning work, and there's only going to be more of it as the city grows. So, councillors, I urge you to continue with the 4-week cycle. Thank you.
Okay. The motion, those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Everyone else is against, so therefore is lost. I have a motion from Councillor Lucas to defer.
Yes, I move to defer this item to the next ordinary council meeting on the 17th of November to allow newly elected councillors to receive a briefing in the meantime and make a decision as to the options presented by staff.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Councillor McCulloch is the seconder. Is anyone against? Okay, carried. Now it takes us to Part C, councillors, and the first one up is Councillor Scanlon with item C1.1, introduction of e-petitions hosted by the City of Swan website.
Thank you. So my motion is that Council resolve to request a report on the cost and other resourcing implications to develop an e-petitions page hosted on the City of Swan website. And the reason is to provide a tool to the community to allow for petitions to be made to the Council as a means of improving engagement, and 2, to understand the cost and other resourcing implications before implementation.
I have a seconder, Councillor Kiley. Is there anyone against? Councillor McNamara, you wish to debate? Okay. A question?
It's for staff. So an e-petition doesn't require a person to actually physically put their signature and, kind of engage. So I was just wondering, is it going to be considered with the same weight as a written petition by staff and by council?
Ms Albright, Ms Lay, who wants to take that one?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, it would be given the same weight by staff as a written petition.
Thank you.
Question, thanks.
Councillor Congleton.
Question through then to the staff on the legality of having an e-petition.
Ms Albright.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the Act is silent on that. I do know that other local governments accept e-petitions, and that could be covered in the report that's being requested in this motion.
Thank you.
If there's an e-petition for a particular, plan or whatever, and somebody wants to do a written petition as well for those people that don't have computers, and there's quite a lot of them, you have them side by side, is it? Both the written and the e-petition for the same proposal?
Yes. That'd be correct, wouldn't it? We could do that.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, we'd have to develop a process, but we could consider both.
Okay. So I've got a move and a seconder. Is anyone against? Okay, Councillor Leclerc. You didn't wish to debate it, though? No, against. Yeah. Okay. So I now put the motion. Those in favour? Everybody with the exception of Councillor McNamara and Councillor Lucas. So we declare that carried.
I know how to use one.
Well, you can stick with the old book. Okay, now we move to item C1.2. It's Councillor Scanlon on greyhound racing.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to request the Mayor write to the Honourable Reece Whitby MLA, Minister for Emergency Services, Racing and Gaming, Small Business Volunteering, to express Council's view that it does not support greyhound racing continue in Western Australia due to the unresolved animal welfare concerns present in the industry.
Seconder in Councillor Kiley. Is anyone against?
Got a reason?
You would need a reason, Councillor. What do you? Doesn't he read? Okay, now we go back to where I was. Those against? We count. Okay. Councillor Scanlon, you're going to have to open the debate.
I don't wish to debate it.
You don't? The others against wish to? Yep. Okay, off you go.
Thank you. Well, it'll be the last time you hear me speak tonight, so don't worry.
No, it's not.
Oh, well, at the end of the evening. So the reason I'm bringing this motion to Council is because I've been asked to by the community, and I agree with them. In August, I was approached about this whilst in Henley Brook, and since then I've been approached by 2 residents of Ellenbrook asking to support the end to greyhound racing. Whilst the greyhound track is not within the City of Swan boundary, many of the trainers are, and the community are telling us that it's not right to continue this practice. Confinement of greyhounds for extended periods of time to housing environments with inadequate bedding, temperature control, stimulation, enrichment and human contact causes psychological and physical health concerns. Just last week, we lost another greyhound in Cannington. This greyhound was only 2 years old, and its previous race, it was not assessed to be suitable to retire, and so it raced again and fractured a hock. And there was nothing to do but to euthanise the dog. And it's not a unique case, it happens frequently. There's been measures have been implemented to improve welfare, but unfortunately they've made little or no difference to the racing greyhounds. Not only is the greyhound racing industry a breach of the Animal Welfare Act 2002, but it's also fundamentally incompatible with the rightly accepted animal welfare models, such as the 5 domains model supported by the RSPCA. Racing greyhounds are overbred in a large scale, so there's enough supply for the racing industry. And the problem is that there's not enough homes for these greyhounds to go to. We are trying our best to be humane to the greyhounds and to lift the standard of the racing industry, but the fact is that these greyhounds need a lot of training and a lot of care in their foster homes before they can go to forever homes. We still have the green collar requirement where the greyhounds otherwise have to wear a muzzle in public. There's a great deal of issues, and it's an undue reliance placed on independent rehoming groups to rehome hundreds of greyhounds, and causes financial and emotional stress. It's a self-regulated industry where the commercial and integrity functions are managed by the same entity. Proper enforcement must be free from all conflicts of interest. Poor enforcement of racing regulations, including the Code of Practice for the keeping of racing greyhounds. For example, 1 or 2 kennel inspections per year is insufficient in monitoring the housing and keeping conditions, ensuring compliance. The greyhound racing industry contributes little financially to the state government and to the wider WA community. Most of the revenue generated goes back into the racing industry. If greyhound racing were banned, punters would simply move to another form of betting. So attitudes towards greyhound racing have changed dramatically over the past decade, resulting in the greyhound industry in WA being widely considered an outdated practice and losing its social licence to practice. 3% of total greyhound starters were impacted by injury, and that's 855 injuries, 250 of those of a serious nature. The reason there's so many injuries in greyhound racing is it's a circular track. The greyhounds lean to one side, build great muscle mass on one side of their body, and weakened on the other side. Fractures are common, muscle injuries are common, osteomyelitis is a common occurrence in greyhounds. I'm not quite sure why. So when these dogs are retired from the industry, usually at a young age, it's to the rescue groups and the members of the public here in the City of Swan also that raise funds and put their own unpaid time, money and love into caring, rehabilitating and rehoming these dogs. It seems no matter which way you look at it, it's costing us, the public. The industry relies on the benevolence of the community, and many retired greyhounds call the City of Swan home. You often see them at the Stirling Square markets, and we see greyhounds walking around with their new owners. So some would be familiar with retired racehorses being in a similar situation with needing homes. I know many of you are familiar with racing. And these horses usually do find homes. It's easier to adjust a horse in a paddock than it is to train a dog in a home. It's just not enough homes. So, this council supported the bill to end puppy farming. We've got our own legislation around dogs, and we care about dogs. I know a great many of you are animal lovers. So I'd like to ask you all to support this motion that the Mayor write to the Minister that we do not support the continuation of greyhound racing in Western Australia because it just cannot be fair to the animals.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. That's your 5 minutes. Councillor Kiley is the seconder.
I have a question.
Question, Councillor Lucas.
I just asked if Councillor Scanlon can clarify. I heard her make a statement about green collars, and did you say that greyhounds that are not racing are required to wear a muzzle in public or are not required to wear a muzzle in public?
So there's a campaign called Free the Snoot, and they are still, I believe, currently required to wear a muzzle in public unless they have acquired a green collar. But that testing is very stressful for the greyhounds. They have to go for several days to a training facility and be tested. So many of the greyhounds owners don't put them through it. And so they still do require a muzzle. I believe it is sitting at Parliament to relieve that obligation of the owners, though.
So is that for a current racing dog or a retired dog?
Any greyhound.
Oh, I've just read the Dog Act, and last year they're no longer required to wear a muzzle in public. So I just need to clarify that statement you made. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Kiley is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. I should preface my words first of all, by saying that I'm not an expert on this, and I'm really not that familiar with the industry and or the dogs and their life after racing. But what I do know, councillors, is that there are so many things to bet on these days through various means, through the TAB or online betting agencies, that it is just superfluous to think that we need to have puppy dogs racing around a small track to actually bet on something. And I just quickly put in things that you can bet on, and you'll be interested to know that you can bet on celebrity deaths. You can bet on...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I don't want to take away from Councillor Kiley's debate, but the motion is about expressing council views that doesn't support greyhound racing due to unresolved animal welfare concerns present in the community. Nothing to do with betting on whatever all these things he was going down. If we can stick to the motion, it'd be much appreciated.
I
Thank
agree
you.
with you, Councillor Lucas. So, Councillor Kiley, I'll ask you to speak to the motion, not everything we can bet on.
Well, then, Mayor, I won't talk about the fact that you can bet on wife carrying or cheese rolling or bog snorkelling. I won't talk about that.
You'll go back to the motion.
And I definitely won't talk about who will be the next Pope. So I'll put aside things that you can actually bet on, but I think it's superfluous that we need to bet on dogs running around a track when there is there's demonstrated effects on not only the dogs, but the number of dogs or greyhounds out in the community who experience a life after racing, which might not be that which, if you get to a good home, that's a great thing, but I know that there are instances and reports of dogs being buried without their ears, so that they do not have their tattooed ears, they can't be tracked, they can't be traced. I think the motion that Councillor Scanlon put forward is somewhat out of the realm of what council normally deals with, but that doesn't stop us as a council putting forward this letter or request to the Honourable Rhys Whitby to say that we do not agree with the continuing of greyhound racing in the state. Councillors, there's just no need for it in this day and age. The world is changing. We've all got puppy dogs for different reasons now. As kids, we used to have pig dogs, and we'd go out and we'd have them on chains in the backyard, and they never came in the house, and we'd take them pig hunting. And I remember as a kid having to run down the end of the paddock with a dead rabbit in my hand and dangle it as my dad's friends would hold back the greyhound, and when we got further enough down the paddock, we'd have to swing the rabbit around, and the greyhound would run to it. And it's quite impressive, a greyhound in full flight, but the reality of that industry is somewhat different to my childhood experience. And I know that we have a surplus of greyhound dogs which are trying to find homes in the community, and it's all driven by the greyhound industry. So I suggest we support Councillor Scanlon's motion. I don't think it's an industry which will continue into the future, and I'd rather get on this issue early in the piece and say that we do not support it. Again, I'm not an expert in the area, but for what I've seen, I do not like the industry, and I wish it would end. Thank you.
Speaker against the motion. Councillor Congerton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess let me preface it by I'm the same as you, Councillor Kiley. I have no idea about greyhound racing other than it's televised and it operates at Cannington and other precincts across the country. But what I am concerned about is I have no idea whatsoever of the impacts on breeders, trainers, jobs and allied services in this sport. And for me to make a commitment to say to the Honourable Minister that the City of Swan doesn't support it would be a failure on my part of not having this discussion with our community. Because, and I'm not sure how many, Councillor Scanlon, you say 2 or 3 or 4, whether it's half a dozen or 10, is probably not representative of the 60-odd thousand homes, 140,000 people that live in the City of Swan. And as a previous owner of horses, and we spoke about, or you spoke about greyhounds and horses giving lives after their racing life. A lot of them do, and there's a lot that don't, which is sad. But I can't go ahead and commit our community to a motion like this because I'm unaware, as I said, the impacts on breeders, trainers, all the jobs, all the allied services in this industry.
Thank you, Councillor Conklin. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against, Councillor McNamara.
Mr. Mayor, I think I've spoken more tonight than I've done in the last 24 years.
Got your last win, John.
So, greyhound racing. Greyhound racing, banning greyhound racing, in my view, Mr. Mayor, is what's the thin edge of the wedge. Do we ban cycling? People fall off their bicycles, hurt themselves. People do get hurt. Do we ban the AFL for concussion? Because there's concussion, and it's a very topical subject at the moment. NRL, the same thing. There's lots of sports, lots of issues, and it's not that I disagree totally with Councillor Scanlon, because I have spoken to Mr. Ken White at an EMRC meeting at Ascot Racing, and he introduced himself as a person who loves the racing, and I told him out straight I didn't like it. I don't like racing. I don't like betting of any sort, but that's another story. We're debating this particular this subject. So it's not, and nothing personal against Councillor Scanlon from the point of view of this, but I do honestly believe that we cannot impose rules and regulations or even ask ministers or ask other people to impose rules and regulations on an industry. It must come from them if that's what they want. And if it comes from them, then we will have a reasonable discussion on it in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McNamara. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I challenge the words unresolved animal welfare concerns. The fact of the matter is that there's been a push from a certain sector to stop all sorts of animal sport, horses, etc. And this is just one of them. And the move to do this is, in fact, using tactics, if I'll use the right term, to make it look bad. I want to talk about the fundamental of Australian ethos. They love a bet. They love a race. They always have. Have you ever heard of a movie called The Castle? I hope you have. I hope you've all seen it. Do you remember Banshee? Do you remember Star Flash, Trailblazer and Coco? Yeah? Well, that was all about the Australian ethos. It was about they loved their dogs. They loved their dog racing. And so what's next? We write a letter telling people that we don't like dog racing or keeping of dogs, or etc. There must be so many other things that you could turn around and say we don't like. So I think these movements to basically curtail the Australian way of life are wrong, and I don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers for or against? With no others, Councillor Scanlon, I'll ask you to close.
Thank you. So the culture in Australia has changed a great deal over the last few decades, and we also understand now that animals are sentient beings. Horses and dogs and other animals have feelings and are worth protecting. So we can, if some Australians, I don't bet, but some Australians may choose to bet, they can bet on 2-Up. They can bet on anything. Exactly. So unfortunately, the consideration of the greyhound industry asking us to stop it is just never going to happen, Because people make money from greyhounds. People breed the greyhounds, they overbreed the greyhounds, and they make money. We ship a lot of those greyhounds to China, and we have no idea of the welfare issues once they leave the country. We need to ban that also. Now, I want to tell you that this is an impact on the dogs. We are here, I am standing here because I want to speak for those dogs who are neglected and hurt, who do not have homes. This is not right that we support racing. If you do not support this motion, to write a letter about the City Swan, you are saying you support the racing of greyhounds for sport, for betting, for fun. It's... I can't believe we can relate the banning of greyhound racing to the banning of AFL. AFL players are human beings who have a choice, they have rights under the law. What is the rights of the dogs? So, Councillor Henderson, you said you challenge that the issues are unresolved. Well, the RSPCA are experts in this area. This is what they do, and they say they are unresolved. I know many vets who say they're track vets. My dad was a track vet. I know other track vets. I've worked at the Greyhound as a volunteer, and I know that there's issues that are unresolved. When the greyhounds have finished racing, what happens to them? Some find homes, not all do, and some put to sleep. Is this fair? Is this right? No, it's not. It's not fair. It's not right. You know, I remember one of the first encounters I had with a greyhound was when I was studying to be a veterinary nurse, back in, I think it was the year 2000. And when I was learning surgical techniques, I was told to go to the cage and bring out a greyhound. This poor greyhound, we would anaesthetise time and time again. I'm not sure if they still do that in veterinary nurse training, but they do, yeah. And these poor dogs, they don't know any better. They did not have a choice to become race dogs.
Thank you.
Please support my motion.
Now put the motion. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Motion is carried. And Councillor Scanlon, we're not finished with you yet because you're at C1.3.
Thank you. So this motion is that Council resolve to request that the CEO prepare a report for Council on the process and the implications of changing the method of electing the Mayor from Council elected to popularly elected. The reason for the motion is that a motion for the Mayor to be publicly elected was raised at the annual electors meeting held on 9th of March 2021. It is something the community has expressed an interest in and that Council should give further consideration to. A detailed officer report would allow the Council to understand the process for changing the method of electing the Mayor as well as the implications for such a decision.
Seconder. Councillor Johnson. Is anyone against? There is. Wish to debate it? Okay. We've only debated a few months, so I'll put it to motion. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest are against. The motion is lost. We now move to item C1.4, and that is Councillor Kiley, revocation motion proposed shop building at Lot 3, Lot 1, number 53, the Crescent, Midland. Thank you, Councillor Kiley.
Through you, Mayor, can I ask that that we assume that the motion, having been at the last meeting, councillors would be familiar with the motion and I wouldn't have to read it out?
I think everybody's okay with that. Anyone have an objection to that? Okay.
Second. Mayor, are we...
Yeah, I think councillors are okay with you not reading the whole motion.
So, councillors, my motion is to revoke the motion as passed last month. What more do I have to do? Just speak to it.
You've got to read out part one, surely. Point of order, sir.
Well, how many pages is it?
I'll read out part one. To one, revoke the decision of Council made at the 22nd of September 2021 ordinary meeting of Council in regard to item 4.5, proposed shop building, Lot 3 Strata, Lot 1, number 53, the Crescent Midland, DA 280-21.
And you need a seconder? And a reason.
The reason for the motion is the proposed single-storey use building is not considered to fulfil objectives A, D and H, highlighted on page 449 for the Midland Strategic Regional Centre Zone under Local Planning Scheme number 17.
Seconder? Councillor Catalano? Anyone against the revocation? And wish to debate it? Okay. Take it away, Councillor Coley.
Councillors, I'll try to stick to, as much as possible, the reasons which we may encounter if this issue was taken to a SAT hearing. And I would direct you again to page 449 in regard to why I believe this development is inconsistent with our local planning scheme and in particular our Midland Strategic Regional Centre. Points A, D and H. I'll begin with H because I focused on that at the last meeting. To ensure future development and redevelopment accords with activity centre design principles as referred to in the State Planning Policy 4.2, providing an integrated, attractive, safe and vibrant focus for the community. This development does not comply with that clause. I did, during the start of the meeting, distribute something around to you so that you'll see for yourselves if you have a look at the highlighted area. That's an extract out of the objectives of State Planning Policy 4.2, and one, it's to residential density, it's headed. Commercial and residential growth should be optimised through appropriately scaled buildings and higher density development in walkable catchments of the centres. And two, higher density housing should be incorporated within and immediately adjacent to activity centres to establish a sense of community and increase in activity outside normal business hours. Councillors, this development does not comply with State Planning Policy 4.2. It is a wording which would stand up in a SAT hearing, in my view. It would not an application to, if we revoke this decision and we went with an alternative to not allow it, I believe that this item, point H, would stand up in a SAT hearing on its own. But if we add in point A, to ensure development of the centre accords with the WA Planning Commission's policy as it applies to activity centres, again, it's not achieving the density or the residential development or the multi-storey that the state government, the WA Planning Commission, want through their policies. Point D, facilitate the complementary development of housing so as to enhance the vibrancy of the centre, improve the viability of the business and provide a wider choice of accommodation within the district. Accommodation within the district, councillors, this does not provide for any accommodation. It's not achieving what we set out to do when we set up this area as an area where we would have dense development, somewhat dense development, an increase in the accommodation provision throughout that area, and it is not going to activate the area any more than what it does currently. It is a redevelopment, or you could call it a future development or a redevelopment. It just does not accord with the aims set out in the Midland Activity Structure Plan or the what do we call it? Midland Strategic Regional Centre. So those are the reasons why it wouldn't stand up at SAT if this was appealed against, and it just doesn't achieve what we set out to do. I just want to give a scenario here. We have spent considerable amount of ratepayers' money buying land around the Midland Oval area. For what? And you've got to ask yourself, what did we buy this land for? We certainly haven't bought it so that a developer could come in and build exactly the same as what was there before. What we want to see is development that brings in...
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
Well, this is incorrect. The developer proponent has not bought this land from the city as well.
I wasn't referring to this developer, Mayor.
Yeah, well, just clarify, you weren't talking about, you were talking about others, but
We're
probably concentrate
definitely
on this
talking about
the
other
overall
land we've
concept.
purchased around the Midland Oval area. What have we bought that for? We certainly haven't bought it so that we could go
I think
in.
you should concentrate on...
Well, no,
this
Mayor,
part,
it's
yeah.
important because the whole activity centre, strategic activity centre, is what we're aiming to achieve. We want a vibrant, active area with, hopefully, ultimately, a large public open space area. And that's a separate argument to be had at a later time. But in this instance, it just does not suit our goals for the area. It doesn't achieve what we set out to do with a lot of ratepayers' money. I'm going to ask that you support the revocation and go with a new notice of motion, which is on page 450. I'll wait and hear the debate and see what other issues come up with.
Okay. Councillor Catalano is the seconder.
Yes, thank you. The whole precinct has been driven by the state planning policy framework, and that's the policy 4.2, which is basically for higher density around traffic nodes. And the reasons for that are basically so that people don't use their cars and they can walk to the train station. They'll use public transport. Look, we've heard the conversation tonight in respect to the Malaga train station that doesn't meet that criteria, but actually we've got that in Midland, and we've had the opportunity. It's council's made that decision to make that opportunity happen in this precinct. So currently, in the current LPS, the area has been zoned for high density under that state government framework and under the Midland Strategic Plan that comes from that, or the strategic as a strategic region centre. So it is basically currently that precinct is designed to go high density, and like I say, it's because we've got to get more people into the city centres, because we've got to stop the sprawl and we've got to stop the impact on, agricultural land and bushland surrounding our city, and it makes sense. So the other thing about this is that we've got this this proposal for some low density, which doesn't meet that requirement for high density, and it's in that precinct. But the other thing about it is apparently it's an interim building. So because it's an interim building, that means that it's okay for it to go in now, because later on it'll be probably, and it's going to be, because interim, it's going to eventually conform to the planning framework for this high density in that precinct. But we heard from the proponents last week in their verbal deputation that actually interim, in fact, could mean 20 years. That is not interim. That is long term, and that is going to have a serious impact on developers into the area. It's going to have a serious impact on decisions that we make on other plots of land in the area. Because if an interim development can be as long as 20 years, then why can't someone else do the same? So my belief is that it's not likely to be interim, because interim seems to me to be a short temporary amount of time, and 20 years is not interim. Nowhere in this report or in the previous report was it demonstrated that interim means any less amount of time, like, you know, a short amount of time. It was just the word interim. And as I said last week, we heard that that could be 20 years. So unfortunately, I think that what's going to happen is, if we're not very careful, we're going to lose grasp of this precinct, which is already has a lot of contentiousness about it, as we know. We're going to lose control of it, and we're going to have all kinds of ad hoc piecemeal developments being proposed, you know, they won't be as good quality as each other, and apparently they'll all be interim, because that's all you need to do is just say it's interim. You don't have to stipulate for how long, and that is going to cut right across the state government framework, the local town planning scheme, or the local planning scheme. What we're setting out to do to increase density in Midland, so that it becomes a thriving, I suppose, inner city area, which is what we need to encourage people back into transport nodes and not out on the sprawl, which means more cars, more pollution, more greenhouse gases, more bush being knocked over. And that's why the state government has set these policies in place, and that's why we need to maintain control of this proposal. Thank you.
Speaker against the motion. Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I have to base my decision purely on planning grounds, and I pretty well disagree with everything that Councillor Kiley and Catalano said.
Point of order, Mayor. Is the suggestion that the points I raised in relation to the local planning scheme not related to planning grounds?
I think the inference from Councillor Lucas is he doesn't agree with you. So, and that's why he's arguing against you. So,
yeah, but the point of order is that actually my argument was based on planning grounds. So you can't just refute it by saying it wasn't.
Mine, Mayor.
And he has to say that he disagrees.
Hang on. You're going to let me answer, or you're going to interrupt me again? I think Councillor Lucas now has to substantiate his claims why it doesn't meet the planning grounds.
Thank you, and I do.
But your argument.
Disagree with most of what you said. So my duty as a councillor, I have to make my decisions based on planning grounds. I have to put aside my personal preferences and only consider what I must and should consider on the planning law. So first of all, I applaud and I pay respect to Mr de Mol for his bold commitment to his Catalyst building. And I believe that his second high-rise residential building has been approved by JDAP, and I very much look forward to its construction and more like it in the future. However, I must consider this application on its merits. And when I do that, having read the report in the agenda, which you all should be well aware of, was compiled by an independent planning consultant who reached the conclusion to approve the proposed building as the application is largely compliant with the relevant development requirements, and where variations are proposed, it is considered that development meets the design intent and objectives of the Midland Activity Centre Structure Plan and the Midland Oval Redevelopment Design Guidelines. So when looking at LPS number 17, the land is zoned Central City Area under the MRS and the Midland Strategic Regional Centre under our own local planning scheme number 17. An external review was taken by Wonder City and Landscaping, who concluded this is a P use which is permitted. This is not an application for high-rise density. This is for a shop, and a shop is permitted under the planning laws. Even Mr de Mol, the main objector in his written deputation of the 6th of October, state the developers are proposing to cheaply meet the minimum set of requirements. And here's the kicker, councillors. They meet the minimum set of requirements, so how can we refuse them? he readily agrees that the application met those requirements. I submit, councillors, that if the intent of the scheme was to only have multi-storey development, then the scheme would have stated that. It would have said you have to have a minimum of 4, 6, 8, whatever storeys you want to go high. The scheme is silent. It's different to talk about residential infill. I'm just looking for the piece of paper Councillor Kiley handed out the night from the Government Gazette. Residential density, and I highlighted the words. 1, commercial and residential growth should. It's not a word shall or must. It says should be optimised. And point 2, higher density housing should be incorporated. But this application's not for any residential. It's for a shop. It will coexist with the single-storey shops that already exist on the Crescent. It will complement it. And you heard in the deputations last week, Mr Alloy wanted to build on that lot, the same as he did back in 1993 from memory, on that site, and he was prevented from doing so by the then City of Swan, who said, we want you to leave that as a vacant block. He is now exercising his right to build on that lot, the same type of building that he built back in 1993, and it is not...
Point of order, Mayor. He hasn't been given the right to build on there yet. It's a decision of council.
I said he is
exercising his right.
wanting to exercise his right to build a building which fits in with the existing streetscape. He owns that land, or it's in strata title. It's not land that's ever been owned by the city for redevelopment as part of the Midland Oval project.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. That is your 5 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to sum up by saying, if you look at the planning law, we have got no right to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. The other speakers against the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Just briefly, I must say that this one is difficult. However, a couple of things were said earlier about, in the opening debate, a lot of ratepayers' money. This has got nothing to do with the ratepayers' money. This is private land. So if we want to talk about points of order and bending words, this has nothing to do. None. Let's get that straight. And so what about the owner's money? He's had that land for a long time and he wants to develop it. In the meantime, he's paying land tax and rates and all the other things. Should be entitled to develop it. Importantly, the whole block of land around the redevelopment isn't about residential housing or apartments. It's about mixed use, about all sorts of stuff. And it may be 10, 15, 20 years before we see this thing fully developed. At that time, the owners may decide to knock down what they've got and build multi-storey. There might be permitted 10, 15, 20 storeys by then, who knows? So at that time, they may, in fact, as we see with developers all the time, push the boundaries and go even harder than what we've already got in the current plan. So I don't think we can actually turn around and say to them, no, you can't do this now. And I don't think the arguments are valid to knock it back based on we want the Midland Oval redevelopment to be this wonderful thing. Well, it's not going to be this wonderful thing for a long time, and we should let the owners utilise their land and their current development to the optimum that they can, and that's a business decision, and I accept that.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Any further speakers for or against the motion? Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, a revocation motion is primarily called for when there's new information that needs to be considered that's discovered after the meeting, but I've not heard any new information here. There's no new reason. The proponents of this application, Mr Giles, Mr Alloy, Mr Patton, want to develop their land. They only want to develop it to single-storey because that is what the economic conditions in Midland support. I'm sure the proponents could put up a 3 or 8-storey building if they thought they could sell or lease the units and make a profit, but there's no business case for this, no return on investment. You only have to look around the Midland Oval development site. There's just one large building from the original developer. The only other development since then was the mini golf course at the end of Cale Street. Small, modest developments are all the market can stand in this area. There's the economic argument advanced by Jerry Hansen. If you look at the likely selling price of an apartment in Midland in an 8-storey block, and then you look at the cost per unit of construction plus the cost of land, you're not going to make a profit by selling apartments in Midland. Then there's the DCP argument, which you've all heard me talk about before. Councillors, given the economic conditions prevailing in Midland, we are fortunate to have this single-storey development application. It represents realistic economic development at this time in Midland. Councillors, we have an independent planning recommendation that recommends approval of this application. It's true, it's not a 2-storey development as required in the design guidelines, but it does meet the objective and intent, as you can see on page 458 of the report. As it says there, and I quote, "The relevant design guidelines do not propose a minimum plot ratio requirement, meaning the development complies with the plot ratio requirements noted in the design guidelines." End of quote. In other words, a single-storey building can be approved. These single-storey retail units are not what those behind the mall would want, but it's better than a car park as it is now. It's better than doing nothing and just leaving it there. At least it's a development. The Midland Oval development is based on a concept of buying all the lands between the Crescent, Sayer, Morrison Road and Keene Street, consolidating, subdividing into much larger blocks of land and then selling the large blocks to developers. And here's the key point, with a condition of contract of sale to build an 8-storey building. So that would be a condition of sale, and that's why they'd have to put up an 8-storey building. But only one developer has been interested in the last 6 years. The land of this application is not owned by the city and never has been, to the best of my knowledge. We can't force the owners to build an 8-storey building, even if some councillors want to. Councillors should not reject this application because it falls short of their ideals. Councillors, in summary, there's no reason to change our previous decision, none at all. This application represents the true state of the economics of developing in Midland. It meets the objectives of the Midland Activity Structure Plan, LPS 17, and the Midland Oval Redevelopment Urban Design Guidelines. And there's no new structure plan. In the interests of responsible government, we should approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? In that case, I'll speak very briefly on this. Councillor Johnson very rightly talked about this document, which is the Midland Oval Redevelopment Guidelines. Sure, you're all familiar with it. It was prepared by Cox, Howlett, Bailey and Woodward, arguably the best in the business. I draw your attention to pages 62 and 63. The property development we're talking about falls in Precinct D. This is Precinct D. So I'll read you the conditions for Precinct D. Precinct D, minimum 3 storeys, maximum 8. Not 2, not 1, minimum. So this is a document that we spent ratepayers' money on to prepare. Council endorsed it, and we sent it out to them. Yet the first opportunity comes along, we're going to go against our own guidelines. Councillors, we talk about orderly and proper planning. To go against our guidelines is clearly against orderly and proper planning and the vision that we went out to sell. Councillors, I urge you to support this rescission motion so we can get back to what we said we were going to do. And in the spirit of orderly and proper planning, you need to support that. Councillor Kiley, I'll ask you to close. Thank you.
I've got a question actually through you, Mr Mayor.
Sorry?
I have a question through you, Mr Mayor.
Question.
This one's to planning. You've made reference to guidelines, but how we don't need to stick to guidelines if I understand about planning. They're merely guidelines. Is that correct?
Guidelines are
guidelines. You're not breaking any, through Mr Mayor, you're not breaking any law if you decide on the particular merits of the individual application that it's worth departing from the guidelines.
Councillor Kiley, you can close now.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll try and be brief too, councillors. I think this really boils down to the vision we had for this area, the vision that we sold to the community, the vision we went for, with this council pushed forward over many years to achieve for this area, to have a vibrant activity centre where people can live, recreate, be entertained, walk to the local shops, walk inside the, walk anywhere. We either stick to that vision or we don't.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
What's your point of order?
I'm sorry for interrupting, but this is not about the vision. This is about planning law. And planning law must be first and foremost. As I said, I commended Mr de Mol, and I'd encourage Mr Alloy...
We're in debate here, Mayor, or not?
No, I'm just saying it's not about vision, it's about planning law. Thank you.
Well, yeah, Councillor Scott, you've got to redact everybody else, but just...
Mayor,
Yep.
our vision...
I understand where you're going with it.
Our vision is
where you're going.
encapsulated in the Midland Strategic Regional Centre as provided in our local planning scheme. It's provided in A through to J of how this will look for the future. It is our local planning scheme, councillors. We have the vision. It is all about the vision. We either stick to the plan, the vision, as provided in our objectives of the zone, or we don't. We just can't willy-nilly throw away one set of rules for somebody and then apply them to somebody else. We have a developer here who's prepared to put a lot of money in with Mr de Mol, putting a lot of money and effort into realising a vision that he has taken on board and this council has given him over the years. But this council now is suddenly dropping the ball and saying, OK, well, we don't have to apply it to some particular person. You either get on with this vision or you don't. This is about ratepayers' money, Councillor Henderson. Ultimately, it is. We need to stick to the vision. We need to ensure that developers in this area get on board with it as well. They've had their opportunity to oppose it in the past. We look at what other councils are doing. Karrinyup Shopping Centre, I think it's just been, it was $800 or $900 million spent in that area to develop that area. We need to support the shopping centre that we have, need to support the shopping centre we have in Midland and get that density infill that the state government wants, that businesses in the area want. We need to stick to planning grounds. And our planning grounds tell us the objectives of the zones in our local planning scheme is to ensure future development and redevelopment accords with the activity centre design principle as referred to in the state planning policy. And that state planning policy will stand up in a SAT hearing and it tells us we need the 3-storey limit or minimum for this area.
Thank you, Councillor Kiley. That's your 3 minutes. Councillor, now put to the vote. Those in favour of the revocation motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The rest are against. It's therefore lost. Councillors, that's the last item of business. A notice of motion for consideration at following meeting if given during this meeting. I wouldn't expect too many. On that note, councillors, thank you.
Do off one, Mr Mayor.
Oh, if you got one here.
Notice of motion. I'm going to ask the officers put a notice of motion for the officers to prepare a report on enforcing ACROD parking bays on private land.
Anyone else got one? Thank you, councillors. Thank you for all your hard work. To those councillors up for re-election on Saturday, we wish you the best of luck. And once again, those councillors are leaving, thank you for your service.